Hi, everybody. I'm coming at you live from San Antonio, Texas. Just kidding, I'm not live. I am in San Antonio, though. I'm down here to present at a conference for the National Council of Urban Educators. I am going to do my article presentation tonight for you. I'll try to make it quick. My article is on the evidence of bias in the Chicago Tribune by Robert Bruno out of the University of Illinois. And here we go. His main research question came down to a question that was posed to him by labor leaders. They asked, is the coverage that we're getting in the Chicago Tribune and in most papers unjustifiably negative? It usually seems to be fixated on conflict and corruption. In order to look at that claim, he took a 10-year section of the Chicago Tribune. He was able to actually get a digital copy of it, and he found several articles that he was trying to justify the tone of. So why specifically Chicago? Well, he's from Chicago. He works at the University of Illinois. On top of that, Chicago is the most unionized city in America. The Tribune covered many stories between 91 and 2001. He found that there were 55.2 times a year that they had a story that had either laborers or unions as the main subject of it. He found that 56.7% of the articles had an overall negative tone out of the ones that he studied. He noticed that 63% of the articles had a negative headline and 50.4% had a negative lead paragraph. If you don't know what a headline is, the headline is the top of the article. So to the right here where it says a crucial quiz for students, teachers, that's the headline. And then the negative lead paragraph or the lead paragraph is the first paragraph underneath that. So, a lot of times people will read just the first part of a paragraph or the first part of the article and decide if they want to read the rest. In addition to that, he found that 20 opinion pieces or editorials that were published between 1991 and 2001 had 19 of them that were characterized as negative by all three reviewers on the research team. Speaking of the research team, what he did was he actually had three separate people read all of the articles that he found, so all 552 of the articles that said either union or labor in them. He had them break it up into 6 different variables, which was the story lead, the content frame, so what the story was generally about, the labor signifiers, so it actually was talking about laborers, their information sources, their internal agency, and their external agency. When discussing internal agency, he basically looked at if it was talking about an event that happened involving labor. With external agency, he was talking about the union boss or the president of the union, so them actually being the source of the article or being the main topic of the article. He had all three reviewers give a positive, negative, or neutral score for each one of the variables, and then also for the entire article. In my opinion, a limitation to the study is he did not really mention who the three reviewers were. I imagine he was one, but he doesn't even specify that he actually was. I don't know if the people that were involved actually were Republicans or Democrats or involved with schools or involved with labor and on the management side. So I think that if you wanted to make it a more balanced study, you'd probably have to have somebody from each political party, maybe some people that are from third party, which means not involved in either management or labor, and then obviously at least one person from management and one person from labor. He found that there were about 300 affiliates of the Chicago Federation of Labor who negotiated 900 contacts over the course of 3 years. So his study lasted for 10 years, but over 3 years there were 900 different contracts that were negotiated. Yet they only talked about 55.2 articles a year. So there's 165 stories on contracts in that time, but they only had 55.2 articles. That means that over 735 of the contracts that were actually negotiated in a 3-year stretch were negotiated peacefully and thus deemed a non-story by the paper, so the paper didn't even pick them up. Who else did he talk about? The Cubs. The Chicago Tribune owns the Chicago Cubs. 63.7% of the coverage of sports unions was categorized as negative out of all of the sports stories. And nearly every instance of a report on the Major League Baseball Players Union was found to be negative by the researchers. The players themselves were also viewed as the bad guys anytime they were brought up by the Chicago Tribune if they were talking about their labor union. Was everyone skewered by the Tribune? Well, the only union stories that were not negative The majority of the time concerned local municipality unions such as firefighters and police, and even then that was only 53.1% of the time where it was considered positive. Their coverage was also the smallest, typically less than a full paragraph. Positive news stories were on average 355 words, and news stories that were negative were 677 words on average, meaning that the paper really spoke a lot about negative stories and very little about positive ones, not just in the number of times that they mentioned negative stories over positive stories, but also in their length. The study revealed that too often the Tribune failed to make clear that labor was actually responding to conditions created by the employers. Most of the time, instead of giving any historical context, they actually just said, the union is doing this. It's willful, it's premeditated, it's lacking any cause-effect relationship. In other words, he was saying that whenever the labor unions were doing something, according to the paper, the labor unions were doing it without provocation. So, negative stories, are they more fun? Think about that. People love dirty laundry. If you look at the Gatlinburg stories, which are in the news right now, they're talking about the wildfires. They're talking about how terrible they are, the destruction, the havoc, how they're burning through the Great Smoky Mountains. Every time we talk about news stories or you watch the news cycle, you see so many negative stories compared to positive ones. Think about watching the Weather Channel. How often do they spend an hour talking about how beautiful it is in San Diego? Yet they'll spend 6 hours talking about flooding in Arkansas. So people are conditioned to look more for negative stories, which of course makes the viewership of a news source, whether it be a paper or actual like media coverage and news station, go up, which is more advertising, which is more money for the paper. What did Bruno decide after reading all this? What's his hope for the future? He said that if the Tribune was interested in truthful reporting of industrial relations activity, it would be reasonable to expect these three outcomes. One, they would have more stories on labor, right? There's 900 contracts being ratified, yet they're only talking about 55 total union stories a year. More of them would be positive. More of them would be on bargaining, right? 900 contracts a year. So you think there'd be more bargaining or articles. And he also said there should be a dramatic shift from dispute stories, the dominant type of content, instead to do productive unionism, producing real results for real workers. I think that this article would be helpful for administrators and other people in supervisory roles because the union was created to standardize labor practices, qualifications, and for the betterment of all mankind, not just workers. I mean, when you go back to the Middle Ages, the creation of the union was to actually have standardized labor practices. People that are going to be in this profession should have this set of skills. Um, on top of that, you have the overall perception of the union as being negative. I think that often that's because of the media's coverage of unions and the spending of corporation dollars to promote that coverage and the negative viewpoint in general. So a lot of times when you talk to people about the union, they have a very unfavorable view of it. And I think that that's the media and corporations really forcing that on us instead of people looking at the positive aspects of the union. I think it's useful for us to remember that all of us got involved in education so that students could succeed. And if we work together to ensure that remains our goal, we would eliminate a lot of the infighting, and I think we could truly change society for the better. That's my presentation, guys. I tried to make it as short as possible. I hope you're having a great night. I will see you guys very soon. Thanks so much.